Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi, say let's get started. We're at the second Mishnah on Daf Hey Amud Aleph. Ein ha'edim nasim zomimin ad sheyazimu es atzman. Witnesses do not become officially edim zomimin, which means it's a strange phenomenon because logic should dictate when you have two sets of witnesses that contradict each other, why trust the first witnesses over the second? Special gzeres hakasuv that you accept the second witnesses over the first, but only when the first witnesses are the subject of the second witness's testimony. Let's explain. Ketzad. Amru, me'idin anu bi'ish ploni shaharges hanefesh. Amru lahem heichatem me'idim shari neherag ze o hahorig ze haya yimanu o sahayom b'makom ploni ein elu zomimin. First witnesses say Reuven killed Shimon. Second witnesses say, how can you say that when we know that either Reuven or Shimon was somewhere else when you say the murder took place? So in that situation, that's not edim zomimin, because the second witnesses have not addressed the witnesses themselves. They've addressed the testimony of the witnesses, the facts that they're describing. Aval amru lahem heich atem eidim shrei atem yisem yimanu osayom b'makom ploni harei elu zomimin v'neheragim al pihim. But what is the case of edim zomimin, where the second witnesses say you can't possibly be legit witnesses because the first witnesses were with us at the time when you say that you saw the crime, and that was in another place. So that's a case of edim zomimin. Now, generally, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we describe the witnesses who are convicted as liars as edim zomimin, and the witnesses who cause them to become liars, meaning the second set of witnesses, are called edim hamezimim. They are mezim, the first witnesses. Okay, so let's just make sure we have our terminology. Bo acherim vehizimum, afilu meya, kulam yehargu. So the Tanakhama says something a little bit startling. He says, first set of witnesses come along and testify Reuven killed Shimon. Second set of witnesses come along and say, you guys were with us. Okay? Then a third set of witnesses come along and say, Reuven killed Shimon. Same second set of witnesses say, you guys also were with us, so you can't be telling the truth. So the Tanakhama says that even if 100 groups of witnesses like this come along, as long as that same group of guys say, you were all with us at the time, and therefore you couldn't possibly have seen it, then all of those people will be put to death. All of those other witnesses will be put to death by that one set of two witnesses. But Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Istatis hizu ve'inu neherag ela kasa rishona bilvad. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, no, there's something smelly and, what is it? Something wrong and rotten in Denmark? Right. There's something fishy here. There's something corrupt here. And therefore, we will only let the first set of witnesses be put to death, but all subsequent will not. So, obviously, the question is, if so, you know something's fishy, why then even put the first group to death? Anyway, we'll talk about that. Minahani mili. So the first question is, where do we know that you don't have a case of edim zomimin unless the edim themselves are the subject of the second witness's testimony? So Amar Avada da Amar Kra, it's based on the language of the pasuk. V'hinei eid sheker ha'eid, sheker ana. That, behold, the witness is false. He has afflicted his fellow with falsehood. And what the language, that excessive language implies is ad shetishakar gufa shel edus. That the edus itself has to be false, has to be proven, or has to be testified against. Which means that until they testify against the witnesses themselves, that they are the subject of the edim hamezimim, there's no edim zomimin. Devei Rabbi Yishmael Tana la'anos bo sara ad shetisra gufa shel edus. That the Torah talks about false witnesses in the context of to afflict him with removal or turning away. So what that language of removal means is that the witnesses themselves have to be removed from their legitimacy through the testimony of the second set of witnesses, meaning that they themselves are the subject. Amar Rava. But anyway, that's the import of the psukim. Amar Rava. Bo shnaim v'amru b'mizrach bira harag ploni asanefesh. Bo shnaim v'amru v'halo b'marav bira imanu hayisem chazinan. Ike dekaimi b'marav bira michsa chazu lemizrach bira ein elu zomimin v'imlav harei elu zomimin. He says something which at face value seems fairly obvious. Let's say two witnesses come along. First two witnesses come along and say, we saw Reuven kill Shimon on the east side of this big stadium that we're talking about. And then the other two witnesses say, you couldn't have possibly seen it because at that time when you say the murder took place, you were on the west side of the stadium. So the Gemara says Rava, well, let's see. Let's go to the west side of the stadium and see, is it visible to see what's going on the east side of the stadium? If yes, then they're not Eidim Zomamin. But if it's not possible, then they are Eidim Zomamin. So the Gemara says, Pshita, that should seem fairly obvious. No, Mahu detema lechosh lenahora bari kamash malan. You might have thought that even though the average person can't see that far, all the way from the west side of the stadium to the east side, but maybe these guys have special powerful telescopic vision.
Superpowers, as we said on Tuesday night.
Superpowered vision, right? Maybe you could say that they have exceptional vision, and maybe they're telling the truth. The Chiddush is no, that we assume. I don't know why we just don't give them an eye test. Wouldn't that be the best way to do
put
it?
Something else in it there, and see whether they can see it then.
Yeah, I don't know why the Gemara doesn't suggest that. But anyway, the Gemara says if the average person doesn't have the visibility to see that far, so then you know they're lying. Va'amar Rava, bo shnaim va'amru besura b'tzafra b'chad b'shabta har klonias hanefesh, ubo shnaim va'amru b'panya b'chad b'shabta yimanu ha'yisam b'nahar da chazina. Im mitzafra l'panya matzi azal misur l'nahar da lo havazomamin v'ilav havazomamin. Another thing that Rava says that seems fairly obvious, if first two witnesses come along and say that on Sunday morning we saw Reuven kill Shimon, and another two witnesses come along and say, you guys were with us in Nahar Da Sunday afternoon. So the question is does that disqualify their testimony? So you see, if it's possible to travel from Surah to Nahar Da in those few hours and the time frame works out, so then they're not Eidim Zomamin. But if it's impossible to get from Surah to Nahar Da from Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon in that short period of time, so then they're Eidim Zomamin because clearly they can't have seen the crime. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? No. It's not so obvious because maybe you could argue that even though normally there's no way to get, let's say, from Toronto to Ottawa in less than 5 hours, and according to their time frame, they would have had to have traveled it in 2.5 hours. Maybe they had a flying camel, or in other words, maybe they had some kind of express vehicle that was able to get them there miraculously in a very short period of time. Not literally a flying camel. Rashi says it's just a very swift camel, like a really exceptionally swift camel. So the Chiddush is that we don't suspect that maybe they just had a very, very fast vehicle. They would have gotten pulled over by the
camel police.
The camel police, right? Va'amar Rava, bo shnayim va'amru b'chad b'shabta har klonias hanefesh, ubo shnayim va'amru yimanu heyisem b'chad b'shabta, ela b'trei b'shabta har klonias hanefesh. So Rava says, now listen to the next case. Two people say, the first two witnesses say that the murder took place, Reuven killed Shimon on Sunday. Another two witnesses say, you guys were with us on Sunday, but the murder did take place, but it took place on Monday. So they're not contradicting the facts as far as whether the murder took place or not. They're just saying that it took place on a different day, and you couldn't have seen it because you were with us on Sunday, on the day that you say that it took place. V'lo od el afilo amru erev Shabbos har klonias hanefesh harei elu neheragim dibo idun de kamasa di gavra lav bar kitolo. So we'll go even further. It's not only if the second witnesses say the murder happened on Monday, which is later than Sunday, even if they say that the murder happened on the Friday before, which is even making the murder take place earlier, so you would think them, so what's so bad what they're doing? No. They still get put to death, these Eidim Zomamin, who say that it happened on Sunday. Why? Because when they testified, no legitimate witnesses had come forward yet. And when a person commits murder, he doesn't always get the death penalty. What if a person commits murder and then confesses to the murder? Comes to beit-din and feels so much remorse that he confesses. Does that person get executed? No, you don't get executed when you confess. You only get executed when you're brought to beit-din based on the witness's testimony.
So what do you get?
So I don't know. It's up to the discretion of the beit-din. They'll either choose to incarcerate him or they'll choose to let him off. he doesn't go to an Ir Miklat, maybe they'll just send him home and say, don't do it again. It all depends on the circumstances. That's up to the discretion of the beit-din. But there is no formal penal code as far as a person who deliberately commits murder and then has contrition and confesses. Now, the point, however, the point that we're making over here is that because when they testified falsely, he was not a convict, he didn't deserve to be put to death yet, they're trying to incriminate an innocent man in the sense that he doesn't yet deserve to die. He's not innocent because he committed murder, but he's innocent in the sense that he doesn't yet deserve to be executed. And they're trying to get him executed before he deserves to be executed. So even though everyone agrees that he committed murder, but they're trying to make him get executed when he doesn't yet deserve to be executed, and that's why they get put to death.
Were these Eidim Azimin the same Eidim that said that he killed him on Friday?
Yes, they're the same ones.
Eidim Azimin can also be Eidim, proper Eidim.
Exactly. So, Maika Mashmalan Tanina. So the question is, Rava, what are you telling me that I don't already know from a Mishnah that we're going to see on Daf Vav? The Mishnah says, Lefichach im nimtzeis echas mehen zomemes hu vehein neheragin v'hashniya petura. We're going to see a Mishnah later on that discusses if, let's say, two sets of witnesses see the crime, the murder, from two different windows. But one of them is a false witness. In other words, they weren't really there. So the Mishnah says that even though they're testifying against a guy who actually is a criminal, but since they didn't see it, they get put to death, and the accused gets put to death also based on the other witness's testimony. So Rava, that's already in the Mishnah. What are you telling me that I don't already know? So the Gemara answers, Seifa ma she'ein kein bigmar din itztarichale. You're right. The first part of Rava's statement is an explicit Mishnah, but Rava went on. And he told us about the following case of Gemar Din, when the testimony is not about the crime, but the testimony is about the conviction. Now let's look at the case. Bo shnaim va'amru b'chad b'shabta nigmar dino shel ploni, ubo shnaim va'amru b'chad b'shabta yimanu ha'yisem ela be'erev Shabbos nigmar dino shel ploni, v'la od el afilu amru b'trei b'shabta nigmar dino shel ploni, ein elu neheragin. So Rabbi says like this. The first set of witnesses come along and say that we don't know, we never saw Reuven kill Shimon, but we were in court when the court convicted Reuven of first-degree murder, and they sentenced him to death. Okay? Second set of witnesses say, you were with us on Sunday, so you couldn't possibly have seen that, but we were in court on Monday or on Friday, and we saw the beit-din convict. Now, in that situation, even though the witnesses are lying, they're convicted of being, they're proven to be Eidim Zomamin, you do not put them to death. Why? Because even at the time when they were giving false testimony, about whom were they testifying falsely? About someone who was a walking dead man. Exactly. He was already a convict, already on death row. So since he's already on death row, then they're testifying against a man who's already being put to death. And therefore, there's no vasisam lo kasher zamam. You only do vasisam lo kasher zamam when they're trying to execute a man who doesn't yet deserve execution. V'chein le'inyan tashlume kenas. And then Rava says the same thing is true as far as paying kenas. Let's say, bo shnaim v'amru b'chad b'shabta ganav v'tovach u'machar, or bo shnaim v'amru b'chad b'shabta imanu ha'yisem, ela b'trei b'shabta ganav v'tovach u'machar, mishalmin v'lo od, ela filu amrum b'erev Shabbos ganav v'tovach u'machar, mishalmin. So the Rava's next statement extrapolates that to not only capital cases, but also cases of paying kenas. Now remember, moda b'kenas, pater. If a person confesses to having done a crime where there's a penalty, he doesn't have to pay the penalty. So if a person steals and then he slaughters the animal, normally in that case you have to not only pay back for the animal, but pay 4 or 5 times the value of the animal, depending upon whether it's a sheep or a bull, or an ox, right? So what happens if the first set of witnesses come along and falsely testify that on Sunday we saw Reuven kill and then steal and then slaughter the animal, okay? And then another set of witnesses who are the true witnesses, the Eidim Hamizimim, they say, no, you were with us on Sunday, you couldn't have seen that. But we saw actually Reuven steal and slaughter the animal on Monday, or even if they said we saw Reuven steal the animal and kill the animal on Friday, the Friday before. In both cases, the Eidim Zomamin have to pay the knas of 4 and 5. Why? Because at the time when they testified, this guy was not yet convicted of having to pay knas. He could have come to beit-din any time before and said, I confess to stealing, and then he would have gotten off the 4 and 5. And therefore, you can't, therefore, these guys who tried to get him to pay 4 and 5, even though Taka did the crime, nonetheless are liable to pay the knas. Because as the Gemara says, at the time when they testified falsely, he did not yet deserve, he was not yet convicted of having to pay the knas.
Same as
Bo shnayim va'amru, same thing. Bo shnayim va'amru b'chad b'shab tegana v'tovach u'machar v'nigmar dino. And the same thing would be is if two people would come along and say that on Sunday this guy stole and then slaughtered the animal or sold the animal, but then they add and they say he was convicted of it on Sunday. In other words, he was convicted in court of having to pay the knas. Ubo shnayim v'amru b'chad b'shab te'imanu ha'yisem ela erev Shabbos gana v'tovach u'machar v'nigmar dino v'lo ode ela filo amru b'chad b'shab te'gana v'tovach u'machar u'v'trei b'shab te'nigmar dino ein mishalman debeitin the kamasadi gavra bar tashlumenhu. The Gra changes the girsa a little bit, or the Maharsha, I should say, changes the girsa to make it symmetrical with the previous cases. But the point is like this, that when the witnesses falsely testify that he was convicted of having to pay knas on Sunday, and the second witnesses, the Eidim Hamezimim, basically say, no, you were with us on Sunday, but either he did the crime and was convicted on Monday, or he was convicted on the Friday before. It makes no difference whether it was before or after they say it falsely state that it happened. The point is that since they were testifying about a person who was already convicted of having to pay the knas, there's no vasisam lo kasher zamam. They're not trying to incriminate a man who at that time is innocent and doesn't have to pay. They're only trying to incriminate someone who already has to pay, and therefore they don't have to pay. Okay, let us go weiter. Rabbi Yehuda Omer istatis hizu v'chulei. Rabbi Yehuda said that in the case of the Mishnah, where the second set, the Eidim Hamezimim, not only disqualify the first set, but a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, etc., Rabbi Yehuda says we suspect that there's some kind of corruption, and these guys are basically trying to get the killer off of the murder rap at all costs. They're willing to lie about as many witnesses as they have to, and basically say imanu heyisem. So the Gemara says afilu kas rishona namilo. If you're suspicious of some kind of corruption taking place over here, then why put the first set of witnesses to death? Once you're suspicious that these Eidim Hamezimim are tainted, so then you shouldn't put anyone to death based on their testimony. Amar Rabbi Yavahu shekadmu v'hargu. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yavahu says, you're right, but we're talking about a case where after the second witnesses came along and were mazim the first witnesses, we put the first witnesses to death, and before the others came along. But the Gemara says, that doesn't make any sense. Maida hava hava. What's the point of telling me that? What happened, happened. In other words, if it already happened and it's in the rear view mirror, why does the Mishnah have to tell me the prescription for what I'm supposed to do in the future? So, Ella Amar Rava Hachika Amar, Im Eina Ella Kas Echas Nehereges, I'ika Tfei Ein Neherogim. So Rava says, so this is the way you really have to read the Mishnah. What the Mishnah means is that if there's only one set of witnesses that are the subject of the Eidim Hamezimin, they're the ones who are disqualified. It's only one set of witnesses that are being disqualified, so then you let the Eidim Hamezimin disqualify the Eidim Zomamin. But if there's more than one set of witnesses who are being disqualified by these Eidim Hamezimin, then you suspect corruption and you wouldn't put anyone to death. That's taka how you have to learn the Mishnah. But wait a minute, the language is faulty because Habil Vadka Amar. It says in the Mishnah that if there's only one set of witnesses, you only put the first witnesses to death, which implies that you only put the first and not the second and third set, which implies that there's a first set, second set, third set, etc. And you only put the first set. So Gemara says kasha. You're right, the language is difficult. But at the end of the day, we're not changing from our position. you're right. The Mishnah makes no sense as it appears in front of us right now. Makes no sense once you're suspicious of corruption, that these Eidim HaMizimin are tainted, so that you're not going to put anyone to death based on their testimony. Now, hahi itza da asoy sahadoi v'ishtakar, asoy sadai v'ishtakar, azla aisi sahadi achrini de lo ishtakar. So here's the case. There was a woman who's accused of a crime. We don't know what the crime is. One set of witnesses come along and testify she's innocent, and then they're proven to be false witnesses. Another second set of witnesses testify she's innocent, and they too are proven to be false witnesses. So she goes ahead and brings a third set of witnesses. And there's no one who can no one knows that these guys are. In other words, how do you disqualify a set of witnesses? You say, Imanu Hayisem, you were with us. So no one was with them. These guys were the most unboring people that didn't have any friends. So she finally found a group of people that could not be disqualified, right? So what did Reish Lakish say? Amar Reish Lakish uchzakazu. You know, Reish Lakish knew the way of the world, right? Because of his history. So Reish Lakish says, we all know this woman, there's something corrupt about her, so we're not going to exonerate her based on any further witnesses' testimony. So Amar le Rabbi Lazar, imhi huchsaka, kol Yisrael mi huchsaku. Rabbi Lazar says, that's not fair. I grant you that she's a corrupt person, but you're going to tell me that any Jew that tries to exonerate her is corrupt? How can you say that? Every Jew has a cheskes kashrus. So if two people come to us from the street and they don't have any criminal record, why shouldn't we believe them? We should believe them. So Zimnan Havu Yasvi Kamei Rabbi Yochanan Asaki Haimaisa Likamayu. Another time later on, sometime later, the exact same case came before Rabbi Yochanan, and Reish Lakish and Rabbi Lazar are sitting there in front of him. So Amar Reish Lakish Huchsakazu, and Reish Lakish says, you know, Rabbi Lazar and I had this disagreement before. I still maintain I'm right. The accused clearly is corrupt, and they're trying to get whoever they can to testify and exonerate them. So Amar Lei Rabbi Yochanan im huchsakazu kol yisol mi huchsaku. And then Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan now is the Rebbe of both Reish Lakish and Rabbi Lazar, and he takes Rabbi Lazar's side. He says just because the accused is corrupt doesn't mean that every Jew that comes along to try and testify on their behalf is corrupt. That's not fair to say that.
They say that she's corrupt because all these witnesses are coming, right?
Because you had two witnesses that were proven to be false. But now the third set of witnesses, you can't say that they're automatically corrupt. They're two Yidden. They have a cheskes kashrus. That's Rabbi Yochanan's argument.
So when he admits that she may be Husika, right?
Yeah.
So why would they admit to Rabbi Yochanan that she's machzik? Because all these witnesses are coming, no?
The first two set of witnesses were proven to be false witnesses. Right. So there's something clearly fishy here. But the third set of witnesses, you can't accuse them. They have a cheskes kashrus. So we know that clearly she's willing to do anything to get herself exonerated. But you can't say that about independent Jewish neshamas. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're telling the truth. Anyway, Hadar Chazi la Rebbe Lazar bishos. Reish Lakish then looks at Rebbe Lazar accusingly, in other words, in a contemptuous fashion. Amar lei shamas mili mi bar nafka v'lo amartli mishmei. He says, what you did is not right, Rebbe Lazar, because clearly the fact that Rabbi Yochanan used the exact same language as you indicates that you must have heard this from our Rebbe. So you were wrong to, even though, okay, fine, I have to submit to our Rebbe's psak that goes against what I thought. But you were wrong in not quoting Rabbi Yochanan when you first told me your opinion. You represented it as your own opinion. You should have said that it was said in the name of Bar Nafcha, which is another name for Rabbi Yochanan, the son of the blacksmith. Anyway, Leimer Reish Lakish d'Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yochanan d'Amar Rabbanan. So let us suggest that the same machlokus between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan is the machlokus in our Mishnah between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda says something smells fishy here, right? If the second set of witnesses can say to all of these other witnesses, Imanu Hayisem, something's fishy, and you throw them out. That seems to be like what Reish Lakish is saying. Something's fishy here. This woman was able to get two sets of witnesses to lie for her. then clearly you don't accept the third set. There's too much corruption already in evidence. So, and the Chachamim say no. And that maybe Rabbi Yochanan says, like the Chachamim, just because the first two guys were lying doesn't mean the third set is lying. So Amar Lacha Reish Lakish, Ana da Amri Lacha Afilu l'Rabbanan. So Reish Lakish will tell you not necessarily. Even though in this case, I hold that you don't accept the third set of witnesses, but I still agree with the Chachamim that in the case of the Mishnah, we allow this one set of witnesses to disqualify a whole bunch of Eidim when they say Imanu He'yisem. Because why? Ad kan lo kami Rabbanan Hasam deleka de kamahader. Aval hacha ikaha de kamahadra. He says, because the reason why I say that something's fishy in the case of the woman is because clearly she's the one who's fetching the witnesses. She's the one who's bringing witnesses to testify on her behalf. If so, that in itself is evidence that there's something corrupt going on over here. And that's why we can't accept any further witnesses that she brings. But in the case of the Mishnah, it's the same set of witnesses who have been standing in the court the whole time. It's not the accused who is goading them on to help him. They're volunteering the information on their own. So maybe that gives them more credence when they say, you guys imanu he'yisem, and you guys imanu he'yisem, and you guys imanu he'yisem. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lacha, Ana Damar Yafilu Rabbi Yehuda. And conversely, Rabbi Yochanan, who's more liberal over here and says you can believe a third set of witnesses to exonerate her, would say that I hold even like Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, who smells something fishy in that case, because Ad kan lo kama Rabbi Yehuda asam darminan atu kuli alma gabe hani havukaimi aval hacha hani yadi b'sadusa v'hani lo yadi b'sahadusa. He says the reason why I take people at face value in the case of the woman is because it's very possible that the first two sets of witnesses were lying because they didn't really know testimony. But just because they were lying doesn't mean that the third set of witnesses didn't see the event. Maybe they saw the event and they have evidence to exonerate her. But in the case of the Mishnah, the reason why something's fishy, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is because it's just too coincidental that every set of witnesses that comes along, these Eidim Hamezim, and say, you were with us, and you were with us, and you were with us. I mean, how many friends do you have? Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so fishy in the case of the Mishnah. But in our case, Rabbi Yochanan says, I take things at face value.
This is before Facebook.
Yeah, right. Next Mishnah. But in Facebook, you can't say Imanu He'yisem. Everyone's virtual. Okay, Mishnah. Ein ha'edim zomimin neherogim ad sheyigomer hadin. Shaharei hatzdukim omrim ad sheyeharek shenemar nefesh b'nefesh. Amru lehem chachamim v'lo kfar nemar v'asisem lo kasher zomim lasos lo achiv ariachiv kayim. So the Eidim Zomimin, what is the definition of Eidim Zomimin? The accused has not yet been executed, okay? And we do, since they haven't yet executed the guy, we do to the Eidim Zomimin what they tried to do to the accused. But if they already, now the Tzedukim learned the pasuk differently. The Tzedukim, the Sadducees said, no, you only put the person to death, the witnesses to death, if they succeeded in getting the accused executed, which logically makes more sense. There's a whole Ramban, by the way, who explains why this, even though it's at face value it's counterintuitive, it's really not counterintuitive, right? We won't go into that just at this time because there's too much information we got to get covered today. But the point is that according to Chazal, you only convict the Eidim Zomimin if they haven't put the guy to death. But at the same time, you still have to wait until the conviction is passed. In other words, the Eidim Zomimin are only proven to be liars after the accused has been convicted in beit-din of a capital offense. If he hasn't yet been convicted of a capital offense, but they're still going through the trial, and then they're proven to be Eidim Zomimin, you also would not put them to death.
Because you may not have been successful.
Right. So you only put them to death after the guy was convicted and not yet executed. Okay? Now, so the Chacham, and why did the Tzedukim say that you only put them to death if the accused was executed? Because the Torah says a soul for a soul in the context of Eidim Zomimin. So it sounds like since they caused him to die, they have to die. But the Chachamim say no. The pasuk says, "Vasisen lo kasher zomam lasos le'achiv." that you do to them what they try to do to their brother. A brother implies that he's still alive in this world as a kin. He's still alive. So therefore, so v'imkein lama nemar nefesh b'nefesh, yachol misha shekiblu edusan yehargu, talmud loymar nefesh b'nefesh, einen erogen ad shegomer adim. So what do the Chum do with the words nefesh b'nefesh? That you only execute the edim zomamin if they succeeded, if they were proven to be false after the guy was convicted, which means we view him as a dead man now because he's been convicted. And therefore, since they made him into a walking, put him on death row, you take their lives because they made him into a convict. Okay, that's the way they learn the pasuk. The Gemara now says, Tana berivi omer lo hargu neheragim, hargu ein neheragim. So the Brisa quotes a Tana named Berivi, and he says that if they succeeded in getting the accused executed, they will not be put to death. It's only if the guy was not yet executed that they are put to death. So Amar Aviv b'ni lav kal v'chomeru. So his father, the father of Berivi, said to him, "My son, isn't it a kal v'chomer? If they get executed for attempted murder, then surely they should get executed for actual murder when the guy is actually executed." So Amar lo limadatanu rabbeinu she'ein onshin min hadin. So, Father, you yourself taught us that you can't use a kal v'chomer to penalize someone. The Torah has to explicitly state that such a person is penalized, even if logic would dictate that he should be penalized. You can't extrapolate. And how do we know this? The Tanya, ish asher yikach es achosu bas aviv o vas imo. That if a man, the Torah says that if a man consorts with his half-sister, either his half-sister from his mother or his half-sister for his father, what's the penalty? He gets kares. So, ein li ela bas aviv shlo bas imo shlo bas aviv. Bas imo bas aviv minayin. Tamulomar ervas achoso gila. So, that only tells me a half-sister. What if a guy consorts with his full sister? How do you know that he also gets kares? So you need an additional pasuk to say that he has uncovered his sister's nakedness. That teaches you that even if it's a full sister, he also gets kares. So ad shelo yomar yesh li bedin v'im ana shal bas aviv shelo bas imo uvas imo shelo bas aviv ubas imo lo kol shekain. Now the Brisa continues and it says, even without a pasuk, wouldn't you have a logical argument? If a man gets kares for his half sister, surely he should get kares for his full sister. So halamadata shein onshim min hadin. So that teaches us, the fact that you need the additional pasuk teaches us that you can't use logic to extrapolate using a kal v'chomer that a person should get punished. Now that onesh shamanu asar minayin. Now that tells me that punishment cannot be extrapolated with logic. How do you know that even to learn that a person is prohibited from doing something that's called the azhara, the mitzvah lo saseh, can also not be extrapolated from logic? So Tamulomar ervas achosecha vasavicho vas imecha. Therefore, when the Torah initially prohibits consorting with a sister, it says it also in the terminology of a half-sister. Either your half-sister from your father or your half-sister from your mother. Ainli ela bas aviv shlo bas imo uvas imo shlo bas aviv. Bas aviv ubas imo minayin. Tamulomar ervas bas eshes avicha moledes avicha achos chayi. How do I know that even a full sister, both from my father and my mother, is also prohibited to me with a lo saseh? So I have a special additional phrase where the pasuk says, do not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife's daughter who grew up with you as a sister. That pasuk is telling me that it's referring to even my full sister is usher. So ad shelo yomar yesh li min adin, ma'im huzar al bas imo shelo bas aviv uvas aviv shelo bas imo. Now, why do you need that extra pasuk? Even with that extra pasuk, can't you derive from logic that if the Torah prohibits a man to consort with his half-sister, surely it would prohibit him consorting with his full sister? So, halamadata shein mazhirin min hadin. This shows me that you can't infer a prohibition from a kal v'chomer. So we've had both of these things, but you can't punish a person based on a kal v'chomer, and you can't infer a prohibition in the first place based on just logic, based on a kal v'chomer. Now, fine. So that is why when a person actually, if the edim zomamin actually succeed in executing the guy, we don't put them to death. I'll just tell you quickly, the Ramban says if the edim succeeded through their false testimony and getting the guy executed, it's a simin min hashamayim that Hashem wanted that guy to die. And based on that, we don't put them to death, because even though they did something dastardly, but here too, they were trying to put to death someone who Hashem really needed to die. Anyway,
Hashem wouldn't have allowed it to happen.
right, Hashem would not have allowed it to happen unless this person needed to die for some other reason.
Are they chayiv misa min hashamayim?
Certainly, min hashamayim, they're going to get their due comeuppance. Okay. Now, the Gemara now says, okay, the Mishnah has told us that this applies to cases of capital offenses, and what did we learn by capital offenses? That only after the criminal is convicted, then they are found to be false witnesses, do we put them to death. But if they're found to be false witnesses before the person is put to death, before the person is convicted rather, we would not put the witnesses to death. So that's true by capital cases. How do you know that it's true by cases of malchus? Let's say they testify that a guy ate chazer and he needs to get malchus. So it's only after the beit-din convicts him and says you're going to get malchus, then they're proven to be liars. That's when we give them malchus. So how do you know that? So Talmud Lomar Rasha. The answer is from a Gzeira Shava, where the Torah connects the laws of capital offense to the cases of malchus offenses. Based on this Gzeira Shava, we know that whatever holds true for capital offenses holds true for malchus offenses. Chaybe Galuyos Minayin. Now, how do you know that if they falsely testify that a person killed unintentionally, and so they're basically saying the guy has to go to an ir miklat. Remember what we said in the first Mishnah. There too, they only get malchus. They don't go to an ir miklat. So how do you know that applies there too? That the guy has to be convicted before they're proven to be edim zomimin. So asir rotzeach. Also a different gzeira shava where the Torah connects intentional murder cases to unintentional murder cases. So whatever applies to one applies to the other. Fine. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, Erev ben Achama, Im lo haragti eid zomim lahotzim iliban shel tzedukin, shaya omrim ein edim zomim in eragam ad sheyareg anida. So if you remember, if you come to the Pirkei Avos in the summer, remember I quoted this whole story. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, who's quoted in Pirkei Avos as being the ben zug of Shimon ben Shetach, said that may I see consolation. One way of learning that is like I swear so much that if I'm telling you something wrong, I should bury my own sons and sit shiva for them, right? Basically, he's saying, I'm telling you emphatically that what I did was correct, that I put to death an eid zomim who testified against an accused, and they found him to be an eid zomim before they put the guy to death. And that's why I executed him, because they hadn't yet put the accused to death. And not only did I do the right halacha, but I also proved the tzedukim wrong, because they said that you only put an eid zomim to get to death after he succeeds in getting the innocent accused executed. So Amar lo Shimon ben Shetach Erev ben Achama im lo shafachta dam naki sheharei amru chachamim ein ha'edim zomim in neheragam ad sheyazumu shneim ve'ein loken ad sheyazumu shneim. And Shimon ben Shetach said, my dear chaver Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, I make an equally forceful oath that what you did was the murder of an innocent man. Not because I side with the tzedukim, but rather because you made an error, a technical error in the psak. This was only one man that you put to death. And we have a tradition that you can't put to death edim zomimin unless both of the witnesses are proven to be false witnesses. In your case, only one out of the two was proven to be a false witness, in which case you would not put him to death and you would not give him malchus. So you made a technical error. And I applaud you for your good intentions and that you tried to prove that tzedukim wrong, but at the end of the day, you did something really horrible because you put the guy to death when he didn't deserve to be put to death. So miyad kibel alav Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai she'eino mora hora'a ela lifnei Shimon ben Shetach v'chol yamav shel Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai haya mishtateach al kivro shel oso ha'ed v'haya kolo nishma. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai accepted two things upon himself for the rest of his life. Number one, he would never paskin again any shilas without first consulting Shimon ben Shetach, because he didn't trust himself anymore. And number two, he spent the rest of his days spending an inordinate amount of time by the grave of this man that he had put to death. crying constantly, and people could hear the howling of his cries emanating from the cemetery. People thought that it was the voice of the executed guy crying out from the grave for vengeance. So Amar Koli Shalihu Teidu Lamachahu Meis Ein Kolo Nishma. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai said, no, listen, the fact that I put him to death must be a sign from Shemaim that he deserved to die. So don't think that he's an innocent man crying out for vengeance from the grave. I'm crying because I did something wrong and I made a terrible mistake in halacha, and someone paid the consequence. But that doesn't mean that this guy was an innocent man. Don't think he's crying from beyond the grave.
Right, but he was lying. I mean, he was only technically because there were two that could do it. I mean, we understand that this one guy.
We understand that this one guy was not such a clean, squeaky clean guy. He was lying.
Right.
Right. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai was saying. Don't think that this guy's crying out for vengeance because he's an innocent man. I'm the one who's crying, not him. He can't cry, right? Because God, he knows in the afterlife that what he did was wrong. So one second. So Amar le Rav Acha berei derav le Rav Ashi dilma bedina kam bahadei inami piyusei paisei. That's not proof. Just because Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai says, I'll prove to you that it's me crying and not him, because as soon as I die, the crying will stop. So Rav Ada says that's not a raya. It could still be that the dead man was the one whose howling was heard from beyond the grave. But once Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai died, the guy figured he's gotten justice because the guy who put him to death himself died. Or maybe when Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai died, he went over in the afterlife to that guy and he said, please forgive me, and the guy was moichel. In other words, just because that crying stopped when Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai died is not proof that the howling was not coming from beyond the grave. Yes, Reuben?
How many judges do you need before he
In Gershon, yeah. But how many?
He needs more judges. How could he do that by himself?
Right.
He would have been Tabai convicted.
Oh, I see what you're saying. He must have presided over the case.
But there would be fellow judges.
So let's say there were 23 judges.
Right.
But basically, he was the one who presided over it. He was the senior. He was the senior dayan, and they all must have all gone along with it. Okay, very good point. Let's just do half of the Mishnah today. Next Mishnah. Al pishnaim edim o shlosha edim yumas hameis. So the Torah says that you can rely on either 2 or 3 witnesses to put someone to give someone the death penalty. Now, the question is obvious. Im miskayemes ha'idus b'shnaim lama parad ha'kasav b'shlosha. If 2 are sufficient, why does the Torah say 2 or 3? To be more precise, a minimum of 2. 2 is all you need. So ela lahakish shnaim l'shlosha. Ma shlosha mizimin es hashnayim, af hashnayim yazumu es hashlosha. So the first answer is, it's to tell you that you never go along with the majority in a case of edim zomamin. Just like if you have the first set of witnesses are 2 guys, and the second set of witnesses are 3 guys, we say that the 3 who say imanu heyisem trump the first set of witnesses. That will be true even if it's reversed. Even if the first set was 3 witnesses and the second set is only 2 witnesses, we still side with the edim hamizimin to make these first witnesses edim zomamin. Uminayin afilu meya. How do you know that even if it's 2 against 100, we still believe the 2 who come last? Talmud omar edim. So the Torah says the word edim, which means a non-defined number. It could be any amount. So Reb Shimon Omer, Mashnaim ein neherogim ad shiyu shneim zomamin, af shlosha ein neherogin ad shiyu shloshton zomamin. So Reb Shimon says, I have a slightly different reason why the Torah says 2 or 3. It's to tell you that however large that group of witnesses is that are proven to be liars, all of them have to be proven liars in order to punish any of them. Like Shimon ben Shetach said to Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai. If, let's say, only 2 out of the 3 are proven to be liars, you would not punish any of them.
Even though you
Uminayin afilu meya. And how do you know that even if there's 100 in that group, and 99 are proven liars and one of them is not, that you don't punish any of them? Talmud lomar edim. Again, the word edim tells you that even if it's a much larger number. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Lo ba hashlishi lahakel el lahachmir ala velasus dino kayotze be'elu. So Rabbi Akiva disagrees, and he says, up until now you've been telling me that the number 3 in the pasuk is to come to be lenient. I hold it's coming to be machmir. And basically the Torah says, like Rashi says, Shalo tomar hol uve'elu uvelavhu ha'isahidus miskayemes lo yeasu bo din hazama limedcha kasav shafhu min mekaymei davar. Rashi basically explains like this. He says, you might have thought, let's say you have a group of 3 guys. The first 2 testify falsely that Reuven killed Shimon, and then he chimes up afterwards and he says, yeah, I agree with them. So you might think that since he's the 3rd guy who's testifying, and we could have only accepted the first 2, then we should only put the first 2 to death when they're proven to be liars. Kamash Mulan, that even the 3rd guy is put to death. Because if he aligns himself with criminals like that, then one who aligns himself with criminals deserves the penalty of the criminals. V'im kain anashakasav l'nitfa la'ovri avera ka'ovri avera, alachas kama v'kama yisham schel l'nitfa la'osei mitzvah ka'osei mitzvah. And you can make a kal v'chomer now, the Gemara says. If Hashem says that a person who aligns himself with criminals is treated as the initial criminal, surely a person who aligns himself with people who do a mitzvah and says, me too, he will also be rewarded commensurate to as if he had initiated the mitzvah as well. And furthermore, another thing that you can learn from the pasuk, says Rabbi Akiva, is that when you have 2 witnesses, if one of them, even if only one of them is proven to be puzzle for whatever reason, because he's related or otherwise puzzle, it destroys all of the testimony. So too, if you have 3 witnesses and one of the 3 is puzzle, then you throw out the whole testimony, even though without him you still have 2 guys. And minayin afilu meya tamalomar Eidim. And how do you know that this applies even when there's a group of 100, and even if only one out of the 100 is puzzle, you throw out the entire testimony? That's what the word Eidim teaches you. This is where we'll hold it for today. Wishing you a good and Erev Shabbos.